I told my mom we were making a commercial, and she insisted on joining.
My son is too humble. John is a hard worker, first in the family to attend college, Stanford and Harvard.
That's true.
A successful businessman, but most importantly, he's an honest man. I know my son will finally bring common sense to Washington.
Sorry, Mom, I've got to do this part. I'm John Gibbs, and I approve this message.
Me too.
Welcome to the Battle of Ideas. I'm Melinda Pego, filling in for John Mongopoulos. Today our special guest is John Gibbs for United States Congress, District 3. Welcome, Mr. Gibbs. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Please tell our viewers why you've decided to run for Congress.
Well, before I decided to run for Congress, I was working in the Trump administration under Dr. Ben Carson at HUD. And as I was doing my work there, our time in the administration ended. And so I said, okay, now that I'm not working in the government anymore, maybe I'll go and work in the private sector. Maybe I'll go work for a think tank or something. But right as I was going through that process of taking a rest and thinking about what I would do next, we had an interesting set of developments back home in which our congressman voted to impeach our president of our own party. And I said, okay, that's interesting. So it feels like to me there is a leadership void and a leadership gap, and I think I might be able to fill that. So I began praying about it and really thinking about it and asking lots of people who were wiser and more experienced than me for their input. And I seemed to come to the consensus that this is a good thing to do. I think I need to jump back into the frying pan of government, although this time in electoral politics as opposed to being a political appointee. So I made the decision to go ahead and run. And, everyone said it's tough odds, you're going up against someone whose name is on all the supermarkets and someone who has a lot more money than you. I said, I believe the stars have aligned for this, and God has opened the door, and this is a unique opportunity, and I do think that we're going to win this. So I decided to jump in, and that's kind of where we are right now.
Wonderful, thank you. What is your background, John?
Sure, so I was born and raised in Michigan, and growing up, I loved computers. I became kind of a computer geek when we got our first computer as a high schooler, and so I said, I think I want to major in computer science, no matter where I go to college. That's what I want to focus on. And my mom did make us take a lot of the honors classes and advanced classes. And so she told us to shoot for the stars when it comes time to go to college. So based on that and kind of how we were raised, I really wanted to go for the best I could do. So I ended up looking at Stanford, and Stanford has a really good computer science program. They were ranked #1 back then, I think maybe still even now, in computer science. So I said, okay, that's a good place to go. And I also loved Japanese anime, and I loved the Japanese language, which I kind of was picking up from watching some of the anime. And I did really well in languages. I did well in Spanish class. So I said, maybe I'll try my hand at the Japanese language. And I really liked it a lot. So I wanted a school that had a Japanese overseas studies program as well. So I ended up applying to Stanford. I ended up going over there to do my bachelor's in computer science. So I did that, graduated, and I stayed there in Silicon Valley. And I worked for a cybersecurity startup. And that was such a great experience working with a lot of folks who have experience in cyber and kind of understanding how that field works because it's so important today. So I'm glad I have that foundation. We ended up getting acquired by Symantec. They wanted a product we were making called an intrusion detection system, which lets you detect incoming attacks on your computer network. And so they didn't have that particular product at the time, so we got acquired by Symantec and became part of Symantec. So that was a great experience to go from being a startup to being part of a big company, but still working on the same product for them. So I really enjoyed that. Then I went to work for Palm. People might remember the Palm Pilot or the Palm Trio smartphone. So I had a really good experience working on that as a software engineer. And after a few years of doing that, I heard this rumor, and this was before the first iPhone came out. I heard a rumor that Apple was going to make a phone. And I said, that can't be right. Apple doesn't make phones. They don't make computers. But sure enough, I went on their recruiting website, and they were recruiting for phone engineers. So I threw in my application because I was actually a phone engineer at the time. Ended up getting the offer, and so I went to work for Apple on the very first version of the iPhone before it came out. And I enjoyed that work. It was very intense work that I liked a lot. And this is when Steve Jobs was still there. And Steve Jobs was not like a lot of the tech people today. He was not woke. He was all about product, product, product. He wanted to make the best product possible that people loved. And so it was wonderful to be in that kind of environment, working on a groundbreaking product that would basically take over the world. And so I really enjoyed that, and I'm thankful God opened that door. And right around that time at church, I found out about a class on world missions. And so I was like, I'm kind of curious as to how Christianity went from just a small number of people to billions all around the world. And so I want to see what the process was like. So I jumped in on the first class on world missions at church, and I loved it. So I said, well, what can I do? How can I be a part of this? Well, I studied Japanese in college, and I studied abroad in Japan during college. I was there for 6 months, and I really, really loved that. I love the people, I love the culture. And so I said, okay, Japan is a place I can go. And it also turns out Japan is less than 1% Christian. And so I said, there's a great need there for the gospel. So I ended up going to Japan, and I had to go through all the application, a theological test, and the background check, psychological exam, and all that kind of stuff. And then once you're cleared, they say, okay, now you go raise all of your money. And once you hit 95% of your budget, you can go and buy your plane ticket. So I went around to all my friends and many churches and said, I believe God's calling me to Japan. Would you be willing to partner with me? And thankfully, they did, and God opened that door, and went over to Japan. So I was there for about 7 years, doing various different ministries, including men's ministries, homeless ministries. I did a ministry with Japanese businessmen where I would kind of talk about American business culture and Silicon Valley business culture and compare and contrast that with Japanese business culture. And they really enjoyed that. For example, one of the points was in Japan, if you want to be seen as a hardworking guy, you've kind of got to stay to work till 11 or midnight at night and never see your wife and kids. Whereas here, you can be both very hardworking as well as see your family as well, because we value both, because we have a Christian foundation and God wants you to work hard and God wants you to love your family as well. So I talked to them about topics like that, and we really had good rapport with a lot of the Japanese folks who came, and my pastor got to know a lot of them. We did have at least one baptism that happened through that program, so that was really neat. But, as I was serving in Japan, I kind of looked back home to America and said, we got some problems. For example, the IRS was targeting conservative groups at the time. This was about 2014, and Christian groups. And I said, this is really big. I think I need to switch my mission field, so to speak, from Japan to public policy. So I ended up making a decision after a lot of deliberation to leave Japan and come back home to America. And I did my master in public administration at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government, where I learned a lot about how the government works and campaigns and different things like that. Really wonderful program. I really enjoyed that. And after I graduated, this was the year 2016, President Trump won, and Dr. Ben Carson was appointed the head of HUD. And one of my friends I met through my master's program was working for Dr. Carson. So I contacted him and I said, dude, get me a job, man. And he helped me to get into the administration near the beginning, and I was there until the very end, working at HUD under Dr. Ben Carson. And I ended my time in the administration as acting assistant secretary for community planning and development, where I had about 700 employees under me, and I managed an $8 billion budget covering homelessness, economic development, and disaster relief.
Wow, wonderful. Thank you. Did you grow up as a Republican?
Not really. Growing up, my entire family were Democrats, but what kind of did it for me was the internet, of all places. When the whole Clinton scandal was breaking, Matt Drudge at the Drudge Report was the one covering that story. And so I would go there to read what's happening in the news. And he had links to different authors on his webpage, including Thomas Sowell. So as I was clicking around one day, I found Thomas Sowell, and I really liked his columns. So then I ordered his book. I think it was called Vision of the Anointed. And that was the very first conservative book I ever read in my life. And I found out about it through the internet, but I ordered it online, and I really, really enjoyed that book. He does such a great job of explaining limited government, supply and demand, why the American people are better than bureaucrats trying to micromanage a huge economy and all that kind of stuff. And I really, really enjoyed that book. So that was the first thing that kicked me off getting into conservatism. And I read Atlas Shrugged after that, and I started reading many other conservative authors. So that was beginning. And then when I was in college, I was part of many conservative part of a conservative group. I went shooting for the first time, for example, which really opened me up on the Second Amendment, which I didn't know anything about, having grown up in a Democrat household and things. So high school and college are where I really formed a lot of my ideas, but especially in high school, being exposed to Thomas Sowell, that was a really game changer for me.
So you didn't have any Republican role models growing up?
Not in person, no.
Okay.
Only people who are far away or whose books I read.
So this is Michigan's Congressional District 3, correct?
Yes, that's right. Mm-hmm.
Which areas encompass the 3rd District?
So we've got most of Kent. So we go all the way up to Rockford, then all the way over east to Ada Cascade. The very eastern sliver and northern sliver of Kent we don't have, but we got the rest. So that's all of Grand Rapids, Wyoming, Kentwood, Walker, etc. So we've got the vast bulk of Kent County. Ottawa, we have Fillmore Street and above. So about the top third to half or so of Ottawa, just above Hudsonville. We don't have Hudsonville. We don't have Holland, but we have Spring Lake and Grand Haven, all the way over to Allendale. So that's what we have in Ottawa. Then we have probably the lower third or so of Muskegon. So that's Muskegon City, Muskegon Heights, about half of North Muskegon, all the way down to Norton Shores, Ravenna, Fruitport, Sullivan. over that way. So it's a more geographically compact district than it has been because there was redistricting this year. And I think it looks very good for us in terms of the population and demographics of the new district. So yeah, it's very the fact that it's compact is good for us because we can visit everywhere. In fact, during the primary, we visited all 38 cities and townships in the district, and we're doing that again. So it's been a really good experience.
Great, thank you. What do you think makes you qualified to be a United States Congressman?
One, I've seen what it means to execute in the private sector, having worked in Silicon Valley. I think a lot of people who have been only in politics and nothing else don't understand that. All they know is a bureaucratic process of top-down decision-making that the government tends to do things by. But having been not only in business but in Silicon Valley, which is a particularly innovative place that produces a lot of value, I think that brings a lot to the table in terms of how we should be running the government. We do need a more business-like approach to the government, and I do have that in my background. I also have a service-based background, being a missionary in Japan, and it's really important that as a missionary, you learn how to explain things in a way that the other person understands, not how I understand. And that's very useful in politics as well. We have a district that's pretty close, about 50-50, and so knowing how to talk to people that have different political ideas than me and understand where they're coming from is really important. And I do have that background because of not only serving in Japan, but also growing up in a Democrat household. And I talk with my family today, many of whom are Democrats, and we never get in arguments. I talked with my dad just yesterday. We talked for a long time. We never get in arguments because we respect each other, even though we know we might disagree on some things. So having that background is important for a district like this, where there's many people on the other side of the aisle. And thirdly, I do have experience in government as well. Having worked as a political appointee in a federal agency, I've seen all the sausage about how the laws are made, how federal regulations are made, how different congressional and Senate committees work, and how they interface with all the different lobbyist groups out there. So I've seen that sausage making, which means I can hit the ground running from day one. My opponent certainly doesn't have that kind of breadth of background. So I think the experiences God has given me in my life and all the different areas I just described really prepare me well to be a member of Congress.
Absolutely. What impact did working at How Did Dr. Carson have on your personal development and political ideology?
Well, Dr. Carson's a wonderful person to work under because he's a regular American. He's not like a political type, but he also knows how to operate in the political world. So it's wonderful to observe that. He also is very good at staying calm and cool at all times and handling things in a respectful way, even when things get really hairy. And I know I've had times in the administration where I yelled at people and things, and I always think about Dr. Carson, how he's very calm and handling those things, and that really helps a lot to just look at his example and his model. And he's also a very humorous guy. He's got a great sense of humor in dealing with these situations, so I like to pick up on that and just kind of imitate that at times. So he's just has great character, a great Christian, really just a very calm demeanor that we sometimes need in this world today. And he has basic common sense when he looks at policy, like understanding the importance of families and keeping families together, as well as incentivizing people to go work when they can in order to better themselves. We try to reflect that in all of our policies. So it was just great to really work on those things under Dr. Carson and learn from his example.
How was your experience working for the federal government?
It's a crash course in, why the founding fathers wanted limited government. I mean, they were very bright and very brilliant in that insight that our founding fathers had, to keep the government relatively limited in what it does. And you have the 10th Amendment, so that everything else that's not done by the federal government is supposed to be done by localized units of government as much as possible. Because if you need to yell at your government representatives, you can yell at someone closer better than you can yell at someone far away. And so that's why they have that system. But we have a massive federal bureaucracy, and even often of the politicians who are elected by the people want to change something, they often can't, because they can't navigate through the very complicated and very thick bureaucracy that's out there. So we have a huge government, huge spending. What is it, more than $4 trillion a year now? Just a number that's unmanageable. It's very difficult to navigate and very difficult for the average American who's literally funding that with their taxes. Very hard to even understand or fathom everything they're doing. So it's huge, it's massive, it changes slowly. And sometimes that is a frustrating process, but it is possible to make change. And being in there for 4 years, we did learn how to make change. And so it's all about having that expertise and know what to do and when to do it, and to navigate all the complexity and be able to make those changes.
What are some of the biggest differences between you and your opponent?
Well, gee whiz, I guess we have 3 hours left in the program, so I can go through those. But, I'm about basic common sense. I love science. I love facts. I was a computer science major. I was a computer geek kind of guy in high school. So I love facts, and I love things that are based on science. And that's, I think, how we have to look at reality, is look at what works. My opponent is more of an ideologue. She's a real liberal. She's supported by all the most liberal groups out there. She's supported by Nancy Pelosi. She's supported by Joe Biden. And they're all lockstep. You know, when you look at the way the Democrat Party is today, there's not any variation. They all fall in line. In the Republican Party, we have social liberals, social conservatives, pro-Trump, anti-Trump. We have urban Republicans. We have rural Republicans. We have all different kinds of folks in our party, very diverse. But on the Democrat side, you don't see that. So if you vote for my opponent, Hillary, you are getting Pelosi, period. You are getting Joe Biden, period. It's literally the same as voting for Pelosi and Biden. It doesn't matter what issue you talk about, whether it's gas prices, they want to force you to buy an electric car. I mean, this is totally insane. Whether it's inflation, they want to keep printing all this money to pay people not to work and keep people at home. And you have all of our businesses around here, they have now hiring signs up. Everybody is now hiring because you can't find workers, because we've gone way too far in giving all these benefits, not to people who are truly needy necessarily, but to those who are capable of work. And so it's hurting our economy, and they're hurting innocent people through doing this. So every single policy you look at, defund the police. My opponent fully supports defund the police. She's been supported by those groups, and she supports them herself. Groups that support illegal immigration. Look, we have no problem with folks who come here legally and do things the right way. When you look at the massive amount of illegal immigration happening, she has supported that. And she actually worked in the Obama DOJ as an immigration lawyer fighting for an illegal immigration agenda. That's what she did. So it doesn't matter what area you look at, you're looking at a far radical in any position. I'm just basic common sense. I like science, I like data, I talk to anybody. Let's develop a solution together.
Absolutely. As United States Congressman, how would you address some of the challenges in education right now?
Well, we have a lot of problems. All the great parents out there across our country, look, what parents want is so simple. Just teach our kids good stuff. Math, science, arithmetic, reading, so that when they get out, they're smart, they can navigate the difficult world we live in. That's all parents want. And that's not even a political issue. Everybody wants that. But they can't even manage to do that. They want to teach them these crazy things you can't even repeat on public TV, some of the things that they're teaching our kids in school. This is crazy. We need parental rights ASAP. We need a Parents' Bill of Rights. Leader Kevin McCarthy of our Republican Party released a commitment to America last week. It is wonderful. We have a Parents' Bill of Rights there. We're going to fight for that from day one to make sure that parents have a say. Now, does that mean our parents want to go in there overbearing and growling? No. I think our parents are reasonable in America. Parents just want their kids to be taught normal stuff, not crazy stuff. As I always say, this November is crazy versus normal, and all we're doing is trying to get back to normal. So, Department of Education, we don't want federal mandates on education. All educational standards and what we do on education should be decided at the local level, not by a federal bureaucracy telling parents what to do in their local community. So we want to roll that back as much as possible. You also want to make sure that any federal funding on education is not supporting crazy policies. If you're teaching things in the schools that are just absolutely nuts, you shouldn't be getting federal money. So Congress has the power of the purse and can control how that money goes out. Those are just a couple of things to look at immediately, but anything we can do to get education down to the local level is the most important thing here. Get it down to the local level so parents have the power and communities have the power, not the federal government dictating to people what they have to do.
Definitely. Thank you. Is there anything you would do or any policies you would support to combat the ever-increasing inflation and gas prices?
Yeah, so gas prices, we've gotten to a crazy state. If you remember, let me back up a second. I was appointed to the 1776 Commission by President Trump. Our goal was very simple. Unite our country by teaching our kids Constitution, Bill of Rights, Declaration of Independence. How could that be controversial? The fact that that is seen as controversial is just, again, crazy. Crazy versus normal. So our 1776 Commission was doing a great work to unify our country against this whole critical race theory stuff, which seeks to divide people for political gain based on race. It's really insidious. It's really evil. So we were fighting that. Now fast forward, Joe Biden gets in there. First thing he does, first two things he gets rid of. One, Keystone XL pipeline. Two, 1776 project. That just tells you where his priorities are in terms of what he wants to do with our country. Very bad news. So the first thing he got rid of was Keystone XL. We need that back. We need to be able to move oil around as fast as possible throughout North America to keep supply up and increase supply. Two, a very simple concept, American oil from American soil. We need to start pulling way more out of the ground because the more supply you have, the more prices go down. This is basic supply and demand. My opponent and her party do not understand this concept, or they do, and they want you to suffer. Even worse, both of those are terrible options. But we have the good option here. Get more stuff out the ground. That way, when you have more supply of energy on the market, energy prices go down. We got to get back to energy independence. On inflation, we got to stop the crazy spending. The federal balance sheet has increased by, 50% or so in the past 2 years? This is nuts. And all that money floods the economy, and it's not used efficiently. This is called the Cantillon effect in economics. So we have a big problem with money being misallocated. That creates asset bubbles, and those cause a shock in the economy. We got to cut this spending down and get things back to normal. 3, we got to reshore our supply chain. Make more stuff here in America. If you go online and try to buy a car, it'll tell you, oh, these features aren't available because we don't have the chip, we don't have the supply chain, we don't have this, we don't have that. We're depending on China and all this stuff for so many of these pieces of the car. It's ridiculous. Why can't we make some of this here? Americans are actually very clever. We are very good at business. We're very innovative. We can make this stuff too. So let's make it happen. So we got to get some of that supply chain back in our own country.
So you answered my next question, how you curb high spending. Do you have anything else you want to add, or did that pretty much cover it?
Yeah, I covered it. We got to be responsible, and we can't go crazy. People always say, well, what are you going to cut first? Well, look at duplicate programs. The federal government has so many programs where they're both doing the same thing. If you just look at those, you can cut one of them, and you won't lose anything. So that's the first place I would start.
How would you, as United States Congressman, help to combat the crime epidemic sweeping our nation?
This is a problem. Crime is increasing. Families are in danger. It's absolutely nuts. This is mostly a local problem where the district attorneys are letting very violent repeat criminals back on the streets. And this is a really silly idea, but again, crazy versus normal. We're in crazy town now. This is what they're doing. They're having cashless bail, which means if someone gets arrested for a very bad, very violent crime, you simply let them out with no bail. My opponent supports that. She's gone on the record supporting that. I'm absolutely against these programs because if someone is very dangerous, you got to keep them away from the public so they can't hurt anybody. That's an act of love to keep someone from hurting innocent people. So these policies are happening largely at the local level, but the federal government and the U.S. Congress especially, the Congress has the power of the purse. So if there's Department of Justice grants going out to these communities, we should not be giving them grants if they're doing stuff to make crime worse, because they're literally defeating the purpose. So we can look at the power of the purse and see if you're doing things that are increasing crime, why do we give you a grant on reducing crime? It doesn't make any sense. So the power of the purse is a big way that Congress can look at this. Also, simply the voice of a member of Congress. You have somewhat of a platform if you're a member of Congress, and people will listen to you, the news will listen to you, using that platform to step up and say, you are increasing crime, Mr. DA. You are increasing crime, Mr. or Mrs. Mayor. You need to stop it right now. As a member of Congress, I can't do a whole lot of this because this is not a federal issue. This is a local issue, but I do have the right to call out. You are hurting the people in my district through what you're doing in your crime policies. That's something we can do as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. Do you have any ideas on how to secure our southern border?
Yes, we do need a barrier at the border because it does stop people and drugs, especially, from coming across. Look, this is a humanitarian crisis. More than 600 of the migrants a year are dying coming across our border. They try to say Trump was inhumane. Well, 600 is the highest number ever recorded under Joe Biden. They are the ones who are being inhumane and hurting innocent people coming into this country. There's human trafficking of a scale we don't know. We don't even know the numbers. Innocent women and girls and boys, too, are being trafficked here, and the drug cartels are running it. This is an absolute human rights crisis that is not getting enough attention. And our current administration and every single member of Congress under Nancy Pelosi on the Democrat side, they are guilty because they won't do anything to solve this problem. My opponent included, who literally used to work on the immigration issue to make it worse. So this is a huge humanitarian problem. Innocent people are dying, and Americans are being hurt by this issue too, particularly through the fentanyl that's coming across the border. What is the number? 110,000, 120,000 a year are dying of fentanyl. It's something like 300 every day. This is a war in the United States. 120,000 a year, that's 2 Vietnams every year dying of fentanyl. This is absolutely insane that any president would sit there and any majority leader in the U.S. Congress, Nancy Pelosi, would sit there and not do anything about this. It's insane. So we need a barrier on the border that will stop things from coming across. We need better interior enforcement to make sure that we can remove some of the drugs from our country as well as those who might be bringing it. We need that. We also need better asylum policies. According to international law, you're supposed to seek asylum in the first safe country you get to. What we're seeing is many folks come through many different countries and they get here and declare asylum, which is not the way it works. If we found out a person has done that, that's not asylum, sorry. But now with our current leadership, they're giving them asylum. So they're totally breaking laws, they're breaking precedent, they're breaking basic common sense. And again, as I keep saying over and over again, crazy, crazy, crazy. Biden's crazy. Pelosi's doing is crazy. What my opponent would be doing in there is crazy. They're going to continue this lawlessness that's getting those poor folks killed who are trying to come here, as well as getting Americans killed because of the drugs that are coming over.
Why do you think there's so much poverty and homelessness in the United States? Is there anything Congress can do about that?
Yeah, the first thing that everyone needs to understand, and this is a really, really critical point, you look at the past 20 years, federal spending and state spending to quote unquote solve homelessness has gone up like this, and homelessness has gone up like this. People think that spending more money on the problem will improve the problem. Well, not only does it not improve the problem, it may actually make it worse. So people need to understand you got to stop throwing money at the problem. The homelessness problem is a problem that you have to deal with a person's soul and heart and mind, love them and help them to get up to the next level in life where God wants them to be. And that's done through the hard work of loving someone, dealing with their issues. They need medication, we have that for them. They need job training, they need spiritual counseling, whatever it might be. They need help reconnecting with their family who might be able to help them. We got to do it that way. You cannot simply make it a housing problem, which is a new trend. They want to say homelessness is only a housing problem. Just build new housing, put them in there, and that's the solution to the problem. Well, we want people to have housing, but that's not the main part of the problem. The main problem is you got to deal with the person where they're at. Then we can talk about the proper housing situation for that person. By the way, California, when I was working at our administration, we saw the report from Los Angeles. They were spending $450 grand per unit on homelessness housing. $450 grand for one unit. And first the claim was made, well, it's just expensive in California. But the Los Angeles Controller's Office, who did the report, said half the money was going to the middlemen, syndicators, underwriters, et cetera, people who get the cut in the middle. So this is a problem. There is a poverty industrial complex. They make money off the backs of real people who are suffering while not doing anything to solve the problem. And that's a big part of why we have the homelessness the way we have today. The last thing I would say on that is oftentimes law enforcement, our great police officers, have their hands behind their back. They're not even allowed to enforce the issue. Even if someone is dangerous and doing dangerous things to people around them, police officers are often forbidden and not even able to bring the person in or take them off the streets where they can't hurt themselves or hurt others because of certain court cases that have happened or because certain liberal mayors that prevent the police officers from being able to do their job in relation to homelessness. That's a big part of the problem as well.
Let's take a moment to hear from a few of our voters from West Michigan to whom we spoke with earlier today.
I support John Gibbs because I knew from when I first saw his belief on the importance of the family that he was someone I would want in Washington for me. Not many people today are courageous enough to speak up on one of the biggest issues our country faces, and that is the breakdown of the family. You can see all throughout history in all societies, when the family begins to break down, then the government, the whole society, the culture begins to break down. And that's the problem that we're facing in America. And John is brave enough to speak out about it. So why do I want John in Washington? Because I want him to protect families. I want him to ensure that families' rights are protected so that we can have a strong future generation for our country.
When I first met John Gibbs, it was at his town hall meeting. And what really impressed me about him was his ability to work with different types of people, working with different cultures. I was impressed that he spoke Japanese fluently, and that when he was there, he was working with businessmen, and his goal wasn't so much for a businessman to think like him. It was for him to be able to work out ways for them to be able to work well together. I think we need that type of person in Washington, someone who's able to calmly deal with all sorts of complex issues and topics, things that need to be dealt with, but can deal with them in a calm manner in a way that everybody comes out feeling good about what they've done. That's why I support John Gibbs.
You know, one of the things about John Gibbs is that he's passionate about his community. He works really hard to create an environment to where everybody is equal, where everybody can look for solutions, where everybody can work as a team and actually find the solutions necessary for things to happen. Here in the state of Michigan, we've gone through such a hardship lately, and so many difficulties that are going on in our communities, so much separation. And we need a candidate that believes in unity and that believes in his community and is willing to put himself out there to make sure that moving forward, we can make a difference, unite with one another, and actually win and be leaders in our country in order for us to become successful for our small businesses, for our minorities, for the kids in education, the future. And our state needs that right now. In the conflicts of everything that's going on, I truly believe that John Gibbs will make a difference because he's not afraid to say what needs to be said. And I know that he's out there right now campaigning, and I know that I am hoping and praying that he's going to win, because I know that in our community, we need somebody with strong values. We need somebody that has the character necessary to be able to defend us and to be able to lead us into a better future. And to me, that's John Gibbs. He is the future of our Congress.
Welcome back to the Battle of Ideas. I'm Melinda Pego, and I'm filling in today for John Mangopoulos. Today our special interview is with candidate for United States Congress, John Gibbs. Welcome back, John.
Thanks,
for
Linda.
being with us today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So we've got to get to know you. We've been able to get to know you a little bit today with a series of pretty serious questions. I have a few more, and then we're going to take a little bit of a lighter approach to get to know the personal John.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
I have to ask you, because it's something very important to me, how is upholding the Second Amendment important to you?
Well, upholding the Second Amendment and strengthening it to make sure that it is always there for not only us but future generations is really important. Founding fathers gave it to us for a reason. We've got to protect it. And again, as I said earlier, I'm a scientific type person. I like studies. I like data. And the data does show that when people use their Second Amendment rights, then crime goes down. Specifically, the data shows that the more people engage concealed carry and acquire that and use it, the more violent crime goes down. Because criminals are not suicide bombers. They don't want to die. Therefore, they know that if people are armed, then they are going to be less likely to attack. This is one way that the Second Amendment deters crime and saves lives, especially of those who are vulnerable and those who are easy targets. So those are the kind of folks that gain the most from the Second Amendment, from being able to protect themselves from violence. So it's something we need to really expand. There's a lot of misinformation out there. You know, people tend to have the belief that guns cause crime, which is not true. Criminals cause crime. A gun is a tool used by a criminal to cause crime. Passing bans and passing gun control laws has never been scientifically proven to actually reduce crime. And so it's not a real solution. And as a member of Congress, God willing, if I'm elected, I owe it to my constituents to only offer real solutions that actually work. Getting up there and telling people we got to take away the guns of law-abiding people to make our society safer, that actually is not true. That's not what the actual data says. So we can't be telling people things that are not true. So if you want to get down to specifics, you can look at reciprocal carry, which means that if you have concealed carry in one state, the other state recognizes it. You can look at constitutional carry, which a huge and increasing number of states are doing. That says you don't need the government's permission at all to do concealed carry. So those are things that move us in the right direction, I believe, and make it easier for regular American citizens to protect themselves. This is especially important, too, as crime is increasing, unfortunately. As crime goes up, it's even more important for Americans to be able to protect themselves. By the way, I believe 40% of all new gun buyers in recent years have been women, which to me that's a very exciting thing because now you have more women who are able to protect themselves from violence. And also we see a huge increase in the number of minorities who are becoming first-time gun owners as well. That's good because this is expanding out to everybody, which is what it's supposed to be from the beginning. Every American, no matter what background you're from, you have your God-given right to protect yourself. So I'm committed to protecting the Second Amendment and making sure that we have that right around for decades and that never gets snuffed out.
Thank you, John. I know myself as a woman, it's very important to feel secure no matter where I'm at.
Absolutely.
Or what surroundings I'm in.
Mm-hmm.
What would you consider to be a good tax policy?
Well, I think Americans now are too overburdened when it comes to taxes. That is both individuals as well as especially small businesses. So I think we need to have more common sense in our tax policy. We need to lower taxes on regular Americans, especially the middle class and especially small businesses. There are lots of ways you can look at this, and there's lots of things we can do to facilitate being able to cut taxes, but I think we got to do that. The burden is too high. And when you put more money back into the pockets of Americans, guess what? That money is going to be used to grow the economy. People are going to use that money to go back to school so they can earn more money in the future. They're going to use that money to start their own business. They're going to use that money to invest. And so when you give Americans back that money, it's going to be very productive and it's going to cause economic growth. So I do think we need to have the government give back more of the Americans' people's money back to them as opposed to this continual trend we have been seeing over the many decades of ever increasing taxes. I think we've got to reverse that, again, especially for the middle class and especially for small business owners.
Absolutely. I I agree with that. A question that's not on our list here, and I'm going to ask it, and I suppose if they don't want me to ask it, they'll edit it out.
Sure.
How do you feel about millages?
Well, we got to be careful for the exact same reason I just mentioned. The government often asks for more and more money to spend on things, and the people need to do their due diligence to make sure that there really is a need for that increased tax burden on people before they go ahead and pass these. People automatically sometimes have an assumption that we need to do this because the government said I need to do it, but people really need to be informed to make sure that's the case. So before people just automatically assume everything is what it says it is, oh, we need this in order to fund this project. Well, how have you been funding it in previous years? And how has that money been used? Has it been used efficiently? Are there other recourses we can do, such as becoming more efficient or stopping duplicative processes from happening that could get us the money we need instead of immediately just going right to asking people to pay out of their pockets for it? Those questions must be asked before a decision is made. And again, on the homelessness issue, a great example of where when the government says, give me more money to solve this problem, the problem's only getting worse. So we really need to be more thoughtful as a population about when the government says, I need more money, you really need to do our homework. We all need to do our homework to make sure that's really the case.
Absolutely. Democrats like to argue that Republicans don't want clean air and water. How would protecting the environment and our natural resources be prioritized if you become our next congressman?
I love clean air and I love clean water, and I think every single American does. I don't see any reason why I would ever want unclean water or polluted air. So, yeah, we all want clean air and clean water. The question is, how do we achieve that? Not only clean air and clean water, we love open spaces. We love to go hunting, fishing, camping. We love our open spaces. We love our outback. That's really important to preserve. So everybody believes that, I believe, on both sides of the aisle. The thing that we disagree on is how do you achieve that? On the one side, including my opponent, you have the Green New Deal, which actually does nothing to help the environment, but is all about a government takeover of entire sectors of the economy under the guise of helping the environment. A totally false argument. That is something that we must reject because it's not about helping the environment. On the other hand, if someone is blatantly polluting in the water or stuff in the air, no one supports that. We don't want to have that happening. So that is something that we can look at. How do you stop that? So I think there are reasonable ways that we can protect our open spaces, and there are unreasonable ways that don't protect anything, but that are being promoted right now. In California, actually nationwide, they want you to be forced to buy an electric car. This is something that they've actually gone on the record as saying. I think it's kind of insane. If someone wants to buy one, let them buy it. If someone doesn't want to, then they shouldn't have to. Last I checked, we were a free country and people can drive whatever kind of car they want. So that's insane. That does nothing to protect the environment. You look at some of the policies California is passing that's making it hard for the truckers to transport goods from the ports and on the coast back into the interior of America because there's so many requirements that are supposedly green, but there's no proof that they actually improve the environment. So this is a big issue of using this whole environmentalism or green mantra for policies that actually are nothing to do with helping the environment, but putting more money into the pockets of a few or getting more government control over entire sectors. So we must be very vigilant about that. And as long as something really does help the environment, is not meant to pulverize an entire industry or promote some false agenda, then we can think about it. But if it is promoting some Green New Deal agenda, we cannot support that.
I agree with that. Thank you. Is there anything specifically that stands out to you from your missions in Japan?
Well, that's a very good question. I think many folks, many Americans, were busy with our own life and our own work and things, so we don't know what things are like, not only in other parts of the country, but even in other countries, period. So I do think Japan is a very fascinating place because it is so very different than America. And gee, where would you start? I would say, from one, we tend to be more focused on being an individual. They focus more on being part of the group, and each one has its pluses and minuses, I suppose. So the way I would illustrate that is, if you ask an American, do you like Coke or Pepsi? You might say Coke, and if I ask why, you might say because I like the way it tastes. But if you ask a Japanese person, do you like Coke or Pepsi? They may say Pepsi. If you ask why, they'll say because Japanese people like Pepsi. So a very different way of looking at things. They often see themselves as part of a group rather than as an individual. And that is just so fascinating when you dive into the culture and you see that dynamic at work. Another thing I would say is the way they use language and communication is very different. I think Americans tend to be very direct and blunt. And when there's an issue, we want to kind of solve it right away and go straight to the heart of it. Whereas the Japanese tend to value being more indirect because they would see being too direct as making the other person lose face. So they are indirect in their language, and they often like to use an intermediary to help resolve a problem. So you have a person that's senior to both of the people in question, and you tell that person, and they would work behind the scenes to go back and forth. They like to do that a lot, whereas we like to sit on that table and say, okay, let's hammer through this issue. We got a problem. We're going to deal with the problem. So, for example, in Japan, if you ask someone, would you like to come to our event we're having next Tuesday? They might say, that might be difficult. An American would say, well, he said it might be difficult, so maybe there's a chance. But in reality, that means screw you. I mean, they're saying no in very strong language if they say that might be a little difficult. And it's on the listener to pick up on that, on the little subtleties that they use. And it's full of that. In Kyoto, where I used to live when I was an overseas study student, Kyoto is known for being even more like that than the rest of Japan. So they would say that if you're at someone's house and they say, would you like some tea? That means it's time to go home. And you're supposed to get the signal when they say that it's time for them to leave. So it's definitely a culture that uses indirect language a lot more than we do. Another thing I remember is in America, when you want to do a serious business deal or a serious meeting, you get everybody at the table during work hours in that conference room saying, okay, we got to solve this problem. Let's go around here, everybody's ideas. But in Japan, they actually prefer to go out drinking after work. And while you're all drinking and eating your dinner, then they solve the really serious stuff because they believe that they can access the real person once they've got you relaxed and stuff. Then they'll say, I thought we were going to say 8.4%, but could we push you down to 8.1% on the deal we're looking at? They like to do that kind of thing, at dinner, or they go to a hot spring resort and they take a whole company there or the whole group, and they will all be there and, drinking the sake and stuff, and that's when they'll actually do the deal. Whereas here we like to do it officially in that conference room at work. So it's a very different way of doing things over there than we are used to. So it's amazing to observe, and it makes you realize the uniqueness of our culture as well when you see how other people operate. So I really picked up on a lot of those things in Japan, and they'll always have a mark on me. Another thing, Japan, when I worked there, everybody who had been there for less than a year, first-year employees, had to take out everyone's garbage every day. So you take that person's garbage, put it in the big roller garbage can thing, and you say to them, well, it's got some of this, which means thanks for your hard work today. You roll to the next desk, dump their garbage out, say the same thing. Roll to the next desk and repeat that. And every day you had to do that if you were a first-year employee because they have much more of a seniority-based structure than we do. So the fact that you're there for less than a year, it means you've got to do whatever you're being told. And then once you get out of that, then you're free. But so they do definitely have more of an emphasis on age and seniority, which are equated with that experience compared to what we have, which is more based on looking at the ability of the individual and where that individual person is at. So yeah, they do look at things very, very differently than we do. And it was fascinating to observe it.
Where do you think those differences stem from versus individual versus community?
That's a very good question. What the Japanese tell you, and I don't know how true this is, but they often say that because they are a rice-based culture, they say that it takes lots of people to properly farm a rice field, lots of people working together. Whereas for us, you can go you were in the Wild West, and you could kind of be a little bit independent in, hunting or growing whatever crops you needed to grow as a family unit. And so therefore we developed more on an individual type basis, being and a kind of lots of people coming here from other places and making it on your own. Whereas they would say that because in the rice paddy you need more cooperation, you need more people working on it together. That gave them a more group orientation. Now, I haven't really read all the literature from the anthropologists to see to a degree that is true or anything, but that's what they kind of claim. But yeah, it's just one of those cultural quirks, I think, that's developed over time.
Do you think there's a difference in success between their culture and ours, and the individuality versus community?
Well, that's a good point. I often think about that. The Japanese are relatively successful, but so are we. I mean, we have a really powerful economy, and Americans are successful in what we attempt to do. So I think both systems work. Both have their pluses and minuses. I think overall, we probably edged them a little bit. I really like the fact that Americans tend to have good work-life balance, I think, compared to Japan. And I think because of that, families tend to have better relationships, especially between husbands and wives, I've noticed, compared to what you see in Japan. So I do think that we get a lot of the benefits, that we are successful, but we also have a little bit fewer of the negatives sometimes that they have there. So I think we do get a lot of things right. There's a couple things they get right too. I do think that they listen a lot in their conversations. I think for us, we like to speak a lot as Americans, and we like to express ourselves, which is okay to a point. But I think sometimes it's easy for us to go overboard. But in Japan, they do tend to focus on listening more. So sometimes that's something I admire about them. But in balance, I do think we get more things right, as successful as their culture is.
Thank you, John. Okay, moving forward, I'm going to go back a little bit with the relationship with your family. You weren't raised in a Democrat household, so how did that impact your relationship when you were discovering conservative values from Thomas Sowell and growing up in high school and then furthering your education and becoming more conservative? How does it affect back then when you were doing it, and how does it affect now? What is your relationship now with your family members?
Well, that's a good question. I haven't been raised in a household where everyone was a Democrat, and then I started to read more on my own. I kind of started realizing what I believed myself when I started reading Thomas Sowell, but didn't necessarily make a huge announcement about it or anything. I kind of just was like, okay, this makes sense to me. Then when I went off to college, I kept reading, and I kept learning, and after college as well, I kept that process up. So, it's something that developed over time, and I think that I really never get in arguments with my family. We just don't have that dynamic where people are yelling at each other and I'm not going to talk to you ever again, because we always have kind of an attitude of respect and never accusing anybody. I can think of so many conversations I've had with my family, my dad, my sisters, even though we don't belong to the same party. It always tends to go well. That does not mean that you always agree on everything at the end. It doesn't mean that you always agree on everything as you're talking, but it's like, okay, I see where you're coming from. I understand that point, and I agree with the goal too. But here's my issue with the approach that some people are describing. You're going to run into a problem here and here, whereas if we do it this way, you won't run into those problems. Therefore, you have a higher chance of getting it through. But what are your thoughts on that? For example, that's how we have the conversation. So you're making it more about the issue and dissecting that and working through it, as opposed to saying, you are a bad person. You don't understand this. The thing about you people is this. So because we tend to avoid that, the conversations go pretty well. And I think that's a great blessing for me because, again, our district is relatively split. So for me, it's not an issue to be able to talk to people who are on either side. That does not mean we're going to agree. But it does mean I can communicate with them in a way that is respectful, and hopefully they will return the favor. Some of them don't. We do get lots of nasty messages and things from people who don't know how to or don't care to deal with people who have different beliefs than them. But I think that we can talk to the reasonable people. So I think that has had a really positive impact on me in terms of being able to relate to people from all different kinds of political beliefs and ideologies.
Specifically, your relationship with your mother.
Mm-hmm.
You have a new commercial out with your mother. I've met your mother. She's absolutely amazing. She has done a wonderful job with you.
Yeah, I'm very thankful that I was raised by good parents. My mom and my dad were raised well, back when they made people very solid in our country, and very thankful that that was passed on to us. And my mom has always been there for us. My sisters and I've got two sisters, and she really focused on reading and education and getting into those advanced classes. Make sure you go shoot for the stars, and making sure that we studied enough to do that. So I'm very thankful for that. And her example and work ethic and discipline was just great for my sisters and I to absorb growing up. So I appreciate that. And yeah, she likes to come and volunteer for events and knock on doors and walk in parades. And everybody says, that doesn't look like your mom. She looks too young to be your mom. But I'm very thankful that she has aged well and is just in really good shape and able to continue to help me out in the campaign and volunteer with all the rest of our volunteers. So that's great. And it was wonderful to have her in our commercial. Everybody's asked me, when are you going to get a TV commercial out? As if it's just, you take a selfie or something and email it to the TV station. I know that's not how it works. But we did finally get a TV commercial out, and it does have my mom in it. She's sitting next to me, and I believe that folks will see that a little later on here. But I enjoyed it. It was fun. It's a little fun. It's a little quirky. It's a bit cheeky. And that's a great side of myself to show people, because I don't really see it based on the media articles and when I'm wearing a suit talking about policy. So we wanted to show people a different side of me and show people my family as well, my mom. So I think it's really fun advertisements, and I think it's really just shows off a good side. So yeah, I'm very thankful for my mom, and I'm thankful for my dad as well, who always worked hard for us and provided for us. And my parents didn't go to college. I was the first in my family to go to college. But even though my parents didn't go to college, both of my sisters and myself all have master's degrees. And that is a testament to, one, how my parents raised us, and two, to our country. We have a great nation. You have folks who were in slavery, then could not read, and then did not go to college. Now you have all three siblings with master's degrees. That is what our country is about. That is why our country is great. We still have the American dream, even though some people are trying to take it away. We still have it. That's one of the reasons I'm running. I will fight for that. We need to make sure every American, I don't care what background, what state, anything, you put your head down, work hard, be smart, know how to get along with others, you should be able to achieve the American dream. That's what happened in our family, and that's why I love our country, and that's why I'm fighting to make sure that everybody has access to that. So it's, when I hear this critical race theory of, oh, you're doomed, oh, you're black, oh, you're going to face so much. Excuse me, no. My parents grew up in much harder conditions than anyone today, and my grandparents did too. And they never took that attitude, never. They say, you know what, we're going to get out there, we're going to bust our butts, and we're going to be better. And guess what? Our kids are going to be better. We're going to work towards that and make sure it happens. That's a beautiful American attitude, positive thinking, working hard, faith in God, knowing that He will be there for you as long as you follow Him. He's going to keep taking us down the good road. And all that stuff is under threat today. And again, I keep coming back to crazy versus normal. The stuff they're doing today is crazy. Normal American mentality is, you know what, we're going to make it. We're going to be all right. If God is for you, who can be against you? As long as we got our family on our side, we're going to make it. That's the basic American attitude, and that's what we got to always keep promoting.
Absolutely. So you've mentioned a few times the crazy train that we're on now. We weren't there when you were being raised. You said your family were not Republicans. You were raised in a Democrat household.
That's right, yes.
Your mom focused on the basics, reading, writing, arithmetic, not the crazy ideologies that the Democrats hold today.
That's exactly right.
And so that we're very thankful for in your
that's
family.
Right. Amen, that's right.
And the fruits that were produced from that raising. I know, I'm going to assume that your mom is going to hop on the red wave this year and going to vote for her son, right? She is going to vote Republican.
I believe
What
so.
do you think on this red wave this year? How are we standing with that?
Yeah, I'm very thankful that Mom supports me. I think that'll be good. And look, I do think there's going to be a red wave this year. When you look at the way the numbers are on the generic ballot, that's asking people across the country, would you rather vote Republican or Democrat? Very simple question. Republicans are up right now pretty significantly, anywhere between 1 and 7 points. Normally, Democrats are up by 5 to 10 points at this point, but you have Republicans up 1 to 7, 1 to 8 points. That portends a pretty significant wave for the Republicans. There are even districts around the country that went Biden plus 10 or Biden plus 14 that are in play across the country. The Democrats announced, the news blurb came out this morning, they're getting ready to cut spending in some of their districts because they realize they can't win. And these are incumbent Democrats who are about to get clobbered. So they're looking at the numbers as bad news. And let's just remember this. You see all these polls saying, oh, maybe there won't be a red wave. Oh, maybe there won't be. 2020, the Democrat pollsters and the media said Republicans would lose 15 seats. That was our consensus. Republicans would lose 15 seats in 2020. Well, Republicans gained 15 seats. They're off by 30. That's a massive margin. They were off by that. So when you see the media making these predictions, oh, I don't know, it's going to be tough, oh, don't believe it. Don't believe a lot of what the media is saying. If you're going to go to a pollster, make sure it's a reputable pollster. A lot of these headlines in the media, they're designed to suppress turnout and suppress enthusiasm. They're not designed to tell you the truth. So I believe with the accurate numbers that we're seeing coming out today, things look good. And that doesn't even talk about the gas prices. You know, who is going to go and vote for the very party that's giving you these gas prices? Biden and Pelosi, they're the ones doing it. Who's going to vote for the party that's making you pay twice as much at the grocery store? I don't think a reasonable person is going to do that. I think all those folks in the middle, and yeah, there were a few folks in the middle who voted for Biden in 2020, but to me, that's like putting your hand on a hot stove. You're not going to do it again. They're going to look at the groceries and the gas prices and say, nah, we need to try the other alternative this time. We need to see what's going on. The Hispanic vote is with Republicans now, over 50%. Mayor Flores won down in Texas. First time a Republican has won in, 140 years or something like that? I mean, you're talking about massive things happening. So I do believe there'll be a red wave. That being said, it is not a foregone conclusion. The work must be done. We got to knock doors. We got to get the word out. We have to make phone calls. I have to keep raising money. I'm on the phone all the time raising money because it costs money to run our campaign. So we do have to keep working hard. Every single American's got to work hard and be a poll challenger, be an election inspector, whatever it might be. Everybody's got to get up and work and get every single person they know to go out and vote. That's so important because it's not just going to happen automatically. But as long as we do the work, I think it looks good.
How do you think your friends and family would describe you, John?
Well, gee, that's a good question. I think they would say dedicated. When I decide to do something, I do it. I decided God led me to go to Stanford. Not an easy journey, but I decided to do that, and God opened that door. Decided to go to Japan as a missionary. Very few people do that, but God opened that door. Decided to go to Harvard. Not an easy thing. God opened that door. Decided to join a presidential administration. God opened that door. Decided to run for Congress against a very well-financed, well-known opponent in a primary. Everyone would have said, no way, you can't do that. Well, God opened that door. So I think my parents, my dad especially, would say, well, when you decide to do something, you do really big things, but God always opens the door for you. So I know that it'll work out. So yeah, I think they'll describe me as dedicated, willing to take big steps. They probably describe me as a little bit brainy. I like to read a lot. I like history. I like foreign languages. I'm kind of an engineer type person, a computer geek type person. So they might describe me as that way. Sometimes they say I'm a little bit shy. Which I can be an introvert sometimes, but I do like politics though. I do love getting to meet all of our voters everywhere. That is really energizing for me. So I guess I'm a somewhat introvert / extrovert combination of things. So yeah, I guess that's how my family would describe me.
I think I would agree with those things.
Oh, great.
John, what is your vision for West Michigan?
If I were to describe my vision for our great people in our district, I would say, this sounds a little bit out there, but 3 words: stop the craziness. Right now, we're in crazy territory. They want the gas prices to keep going up, so you're paying $7 a gallon. They want you to buy an electric car that costs $50,000 or $60,000. They want your kids to be taught crazy things in school that cannot even be repeated in polite company. They want you to be guilty if you're white, innocent, a victim who's doomed if you're black, taking away total individual agency and choices, but defining you based on your race. They want total chaos overseas. We have chaos all over the world with the folks that are in charge of our country right now. Everything that they're advocating for is totally crazy. We got to get back to normal. Normal means American energy independence, lower gas prices, lower prices at the grocery stores, jobs for people, not paying people not to work, but getting people into work and the jobs, being respected overseas. It means parents have a say if their kids are being taught something crazy in schools. It means kids should not be taught crazy things in schools at all. It means that you should be judged based on the content of your character, not the color of your skin. That's normal. That's normal America that people on all sides actually support and should support. So my vision for West Michigan is that we would get back to normal and get away from the craziness that we have right now.
Absolutely. Wrapping up, John, can you tell us about any events coming up?
Yes, people can go to my website, votejohngibbs.com, and they can find all of our events coming up. But we're going to be at the Polish Festival this Saturday in Grand Rapids. We're going to be in the parade. So that'll be wonderful. Go ahead and come out and visit that. That's the number one thing I can think of. We have other things happening too. So if folks go to votejohngibbs.com, they can not only find out future events coming up, they can also join our prayer list. The most important thing of all, get our prayer email. You can join our prayer chat room. That's a huge part of our campaign. You can also volunteer to door knock. We need that. You can volunteer to phone bank with us. You can volunteer to get a yard sign, and also importantly, you can sign up to donate. It does take money to run a campaign.
Support contributions are so very important.
Absolutely.
VoteJohnGibbs.com once
That's
again,
correct.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you so much for coming on to Battle of Ideas today, John Gibbs, and I'm rooting for you. Good luck.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. I told my mom we were making a commercial, and she insisted on joining.
My son is too humble. John is a hard worker, first in the family to attend college, Stanford and Harvard.
That's true.
A successful businessman, but most importantly, he's an honest man. I know my son will finally bring common sense to Washington.
Sorry, Mom, I've got to do this part. I'm John Gibbs, and I approve this message.
Me too.